Turn it on over to y'all.
Good morning, SEAHO friends and family. My name is Dr. Megan Becker, and I serve as the Associate Director of Residential Life at Virginia Commonwealth University.
Good morning, colleagues. Thanks for picking our session. I'm Kathy Hobgood at Clemson University in South Carolina.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Cooper Melton. I'm an Associate Principal at Ayers St. Gross Architects and Planners.
And I'm a colleague of Cooper's, Vice President at Ayers St. Gross Architects.
And hello, SEAHO friends. I'm Gavin, Roark, Director of Residential Life and Housing at Virginia Commonwealth University.
All right. So we want to kind of kick off our session in true fashion to make sure that you all understand kind of where we're going this morning in regards to what we hope that we are able to impart to you with our learning outcomes. So ultimately, we want to ensure that we're exploring how thoughtfully planned living environments can produce an on-campus community expressive of campus culture and the institution's residence life mission. Also recognize the importance and impact of long-range planning on successful housing communities, as well as understand ways to implement quality housing in a budget-challenged environment. So before we kind of kick off the bulk of our presentation, we want to just kind of put this question out there for the group, which is, what's your big idea? Both from Clemson and from VCU, we're going to be sharing information in regards to how we've worked with Ayers St. Gross in the past in regards to implementing our big ideas on our college campuses. And so if you have ideas that you're interested in, we definitely want to encourage you to put that in the chat so that we can engage throughout our presentation with you and help kind of brainstorm ideas and whatnot. But ultimately, we hope that you learn a little bit from our process of working with Ayers St. Gross this year or over the last few years in regards to our big ideas on our college campus.
I would absolutely echo that, Megan. The iterative process of all of our projects really does, it's exciting to look back and see how do we implement those big ideas over time. So if you're thinking like, oh, I don't have any big ideas, you have big ideas. They just take the time to come to fruition. And no dream is too small at the beginning of that time frame, for sure. A little bit of information about Clemson University, founded in 1889, large rural campus bordering Lake Hartwell, which we always show in the beauty shot in the background. Our undergraduate enrollment is just over 20,000. Clemson did grow by 3.5% last year, which was a surprise to all of us. I'm looking at application numbers, so we're continuing to certainly keep track of what those enrollment trends look like. About 33% of our students live on campus, 30% of our undergraduate students. That number is down from about 50% 10 years ago, mostly due to enrollment growth, but also as our on-campus occupancy and locations have changed. During the past year, much like other campuses, we've had an adjusted COVID occupancy, and we did take off about 350 beds for isolation and quarantine housing. So our on-campus occupancy over this calendar year will be right at around 86%.
And I get to share a little bit about VCU because I think it also helps set the stage related to kind of our slides. And founded in 1838, we were originally known as the Medical College of Hampton, Sydney, and then later became the Medical College of Virginia. And then in 1968, we merged and renamed what we know now, Virginia Commonwealth University. I share that because I think it also gives a sense of how housing has transitioned over time as well. We were really more of a commuter type college a few years back, and the housing program has been more established probably in the past like 10 years than it was previously in terms of growth opportunities. 158-acre campus, but we are in urban setting downtown Richmond, and I think that's important to highlight because you're going to see those differences in both the projects that Kathy talks about as well as what Megan and I talk about. But I think it also highlights the work of Ayers St. Gross related to two very different style campuses and allows us to kind of go from there and show you what, how that integrates in the approach. And then we, again, as Kathy talked about with COVID, so We currently have 3,443 owned campus housing students, and I'm using for my occupancy that 55%. That's of what my full-fledged occupancy would be if I didn't take any beds off for COVID. It raises about 10% to 65% when you take into account that I took beds offline like Kathy did as well. But yeah, we are, I've got some friends on the call that I know occupancy is lower and some higher, but I think we all are making it through as best we can. And but I think it kind of paints a photo of kind of VCU and kind of where we're at.
So for those that aren't familiar, Ayers St. Gross is a multidisciplinary design firm, really built around serving higher education. Go ahead. And we, in the last 20 years, have developed a national student housing expertise, really learning so much from people like our clients here from VCU and Clemson today.
So it's my honor to get to talk to you a little bit today about our Douthit Hills project. This is really we talk about a vision that took a village plus a whole decade to help make happen. The project opened in 2018 and is now in its third year of full occupancy, so coming up on the beginning of the fourth year this fall. Multiple corporate partners, financial planners, master planners, campus colleagues helped us to develop it through a number of iterations, as well as a presidential change at our university, a provost change at our university, and a vice president for student affairs change over the time frame of this project. So someday I think I have a conference presentation in me about that shifting dynamic, and certainly how that calls upon us as housing professionals to use our influential leadership over time frames. You know, the next slide for me, Cooper. Thank you for driving for us. So you can see this is the original use of Douthit Hills. It started its life on campus as an pretty old school apartment complex for married family student housing, which is what it was for 1965 to 2006. So a really long time frame that Douthit Hills was there. And you can see sort of along that winding spine, all these little duplex housing units right at the gateway to campus. So the piece of land in particular had a whole lot of potential, and as we originally envisioned it, starting in 2006 and 2007, we were talking about this gateway and how could we maximize the location that piece of land sat on for the best use for campus. Next slide, please. So as part of our 2008-9 $500,000 master plan, we have this high energy mixed use piece in mind, and you can see at the top of your screen, those are a replication or replacement for that married family student housing that we had gotten rid of, set for graduate students mostly, but also professional students and families, if that made sense. Those were duplexes with these lovely gardens. And then at the front side, you can see what the traditional undergraduate student housing that would be in that location. And then in the middle section, you can see sort of two buildings that really were designed as a gateway to campus. So when you come drive into the main part of campus here in Clemson, we thought, wouldn't it be great if we had an admissions office, a bookstore, a financial aid office, satellite, really this place where you could pull in right away and get everything that you needed to plan your day for touring, etc. That was part of that vision that didn't in the end work for us, but really I think was part of the iteration of the project. Also key to this project, you can see on the left-hand side, a gray square that's labeled the Clemson House, which was a 1950s hotel that had been in use as a residence hall since 1973. And it was really a driver of the project. And we completed our 2008 master plan just in time for the financial recession. So it really got done and went up on the shelf where it sat for about 4 years. Next slide, please, Cooper. Fast forwarding to 2008, and we're back, starting to dust off. What were those plans? What were those visions? Do we have the opportunities now to really make this come to life? And our burden here, or our challenge rather, as influential leaders on campus was to how to maximize this project for the best use of students, but also to pay for it. So when we think about what did we have dollars for and what could we put there that could help really support it, So this is a version of the project where the alignment is starting to come into place, but also the buildings are starting to come into place. What types of buildings are going to make sense, and really what services are we able to do as opposed to the add-ons. This was the phase of the project where everybody wanted to add a building at Douthit Hills. Everybody wanted to add something that they thought was going to make sense for their department, partially on Housing's dollar. Next slide, please. So here's where you start to see the next iteration and part of that extra coming back out, really winnowing down the project, really focusing in on the spine of campus, which goes straight through to our old main building and then lines up on that spine all the way down to the stadium. We like to say that if you live at the back of Douthit Hills, you are straight on line to the goalposts in Death Valley. And when we focus on this piece, you really see the site, and you really see the pieces, I think, that help our architect friends get excited about working with us. So I'm going to turn it over to Eric to talk a little bit about that.
Thanks, Kathy. So as Kathy mentioned, here's a picture of Old Main, and this tower right in the middle is what that whole axis is referencing and relating to. Go ahead. It's a very big site. There's a lot of topography. The light green are the high points. The darker green are where the grade falls to lower levels. So that was a lot to negotiate. Also, there was a kind of a natural pinch point, which you see here as a green oval that's labeled the hub. And that's where the hub actually did end up kind of anchoring the center and bringing activity from the upper class housing to the left and the lower class or first year housing to the right. And so we inherited that scheme that Kathy spoke to, and we wanted to enrich it further, not just in one direction, but in both directions. So we came up with a lot of studies of how to allow, as Kathy said, since this is a gateway to campus, how not to just see a wall of buildings, but be able to see in and appreciate the spaces these buildings are making along that axis. So here you can see one of those studies, always with that axis in mind, but you can see now how we were starting to get a cross grain worked into it as well. And this is the site plan of the final design. And I'll turn it back over to Kathy.
Thanks, Eric. I always love listening to talk about topography. I've never understood it quite the same way before this project. So moving forward, 2014 begins with land clearance. And really this project took a full 3.5, 4 years because of the deep amounts of infrastructure that were needed. During this time frame, some of those leadership transitions happened on campus. So really the conversations about, were we going to build housing for our Bridge to Clemson student program, or was that better used for incoming first-year students? Also the decisions that we were going to demolish the Clemson house as part of that project and move forward with other things on this piece of land. But one of the things that's really most important about this time frame is that center building for the hub building really became a student affairs hub. There was an academic focus to that originally, an administrative focus. But in the end, as we worked with our campus master planners, we had the freedom to build things into that really made it a mini student union as opposed to an administrative building. And this is a beauty shot of the end product for Douthit Hills. This is one of my favorite pictures in the whole wide world. If anybody ever tells you to cut money out of a project for final photography, tell them no. Because you can really see how this plays out, the in and out that Eric talked about, that really makes it a really great location. Next slide, please. I want to show you just some of the final pieces so you can see them. This is our West Zone apartments at Douthit Hills. 887 apartments for undergraduate students. So lots of locations to live and be. They're single bedroom. Students really like those. And then on the back end, where we talked about bridge students before, those are traditional first-year student beds built with a wet core bathroom design. Next slide, please. You can also see some of that influential leadership coming into place with this picture, this site plan. You can see where the Clemson house comes out. We were the only thing happening on Douthit Hills And now our campus boasts a new College of Business building right there on the edge of the property. So some of the infrastructure that was invested in really comes to a head and really gave us an opportunity as a campus to rethink life across the street, so to speak. Next screen, please. I want to talk to you about a couple of things that were just sort of the big picture, the big ideas that came through this project. Sometimes the big ideas are in the little things. We did not have in our campus inventory of rooms single beds anywhere. And our students had told us that if anything, as we planned the apartments at Douthit, they wanted single rooms and they wanted full-size beds. And they didn't so much care if they had to jump from the door to the bed in terms of how much space was left over. And that what we wanted for furniture really didn't exist. We went out looking for it, couldn't find things that made sense for us. So we worked with our architect colleagues and commissioned a competition. And we put out an RFP that said Clemson University seeks unique bedroom furniture for upper class student apartments, must have all of these criteria. And this furniture was designed for us by our good colleagues at Southwest Contract. Don't make any money from them, I'm just giving credit. They participated in an iterative process. We had 8 companies apply for that. And then 3 of them built prototypes and came to campus and let students walk and look and be and see what that looked like. So we were really proud of that. My favorite thing any of our students have ever said about Douthit is that they've lived in rooms that were twice as big, but half as functional. So where we can hit that sweet spot, I think all the pieces that come together in the design, the furniture, and the life that we build there is really so important. Next slide, please. We built a lot of deep lounges and wow spaces, lots of different nodes, lots of places to be and see and spend time together. This picture obviously pre-COVID, but we look forward to that again in the future. Next slide, please. I'm going to go through a couple of slides pretty quickly just to make sure that I give you some of the visuals. So I wanted to walk you through all the things that are in the hub building. We really wanted to plan that true hub for student life in a location where the full campus community could come together. So there are about 1,600 students that live at Douthit Hills, but the hub building is open for anyone across campus. And it took a little bit of time for students to get used to that in their primary use of it, but it absolutely has been the case. So next slide, please. So that's the beauty shot of the hub building at night. And then I want to walk you through what's on each floor. So on the 3rd floor, we have residential dining. And Cooper, you can feel free to kind of quote ahead while I talk. Residential dining that works off of a meal exchange as well as a la carte. That was something that did not exist before. Campus Rec on the 2nd floor, 27,000 square feet of workout and group fitness space that's run by our Campus Rec folks as an adjunct to Fike Fitness Center. You can see the great location that we have there. Students really enjoy the space. Faculty would love to be there, but we don't allow their membership to work, so that's contentious on campus, but we'll work our way through that. There's a full classroom, a full spin studio, as well as full TRX track, as well as a really nice locker room. It's like a spa. And then on the 1st floor, we have retail dining and the campus bookstore. Having a true campus hub there really helps bring people up. We have both a Starbucks, Russian's Yogurt, our Barnes & Noble bookstore is there, and lots of spaces to be and spend time together for students. So, and this is the reverse view. You can see the College of Business building, just coming out on the left there. As we look at what the campus space looks like. One of the things that I think for this project, that really helps make it a home is all of these locations to be and see. And this is a rooftop lounge on the 4th floor that looks back towards campus. And we also gifted our campus with a number of naming opportunities. Aside from the buildings, there are 10 lounges that are appropriate for naming. So the development staff love us for that. So thank you for coming along on our Douthit Hills journey, and I look forward to chatting with folks about it.
I get to share a little bit about VCU before teeing it up for Megan. And one of the things that just kind of came to mind, as well as Kathy talked about her furniture process, and is I see some of the folks in the room were at the newcomer SEAHO meeting, and it just speaks to that corporate partner relationships. And that you may not be the buyer now, but you might be the buyer down the road, and some of that. But I also first worked with Ayers St. Gross when I was an entry-level staff member at Wake Forest. I got to VCU and they were already involved with the master plan there. So it kind of comes full circle for me with the VCU experience and working on our master plan in this particular project. So I just continue to highlight that because I think it's worth sharing. If you're an SHO on the call, sharing that with your entry-level staff so that they really understand that connection to the big idea and the projects that we do. So this first slide, you see a little bit of VCU campus. So on the left of your screen, you're seeing the Monroe Park campus, which is where the project that we're looking at kind of connects. And then about a mile down on the right, you'll see our MCV campus. And so that was our initial and original kind of looking at what that means in an urban environment. So all these buildings in between are city or private, but it is downtown Richmond. And so I think it gives that perspective. So on the next slide, you'll be able to see a little bit more where we go in and as we're highlighting our master plan, you know, all those buildings that are pretty colors are housing in some form. And so what is there on the left that's in that aqua and looks kind of like a snake is kind of what I usually, right in there, is what GRC 1, 2, and 3 was prior to us kind of going through the idea of a housing master plan. And again, on the next slide, you can see that when I first got to VCU, we were engaged in a housing master plan project under Dr. Irwin. I was the associate director and getting to work in it from that lens and then bring it to fruition with an actual first project from that plan. And so for us, it was important when looking at the housing master plan, it was important for us to really think about, you know, department growth opportunities. What's this look like in a residential environment? What's it in an urban setting? And what's that look like both from an admission standpoint and we also had the idea around our master plan and maintenance review. We had some buildings that needed a little love and care, if you will, and some systems in those buildings that needed some love and care. And then as you'll see, one that just needed to go away into the sunset so that a new one could be built. But we also did a demand study in 2014 and then did an updated one in 2018. And I think all of that goes back to influencing future decisions. So when I think about the big idea, I think about the idea of what data points do you need from both within your department, but also campus partners across campus and future vision setting opportunities to come up with a plan of what the future of your program can look like. So if you've not engaged in a housing master plan, I would highly encourage you to look at what that process might look like on your campus. And so we came out with 4 really big goals, you know, as our primary drivers. And that was, again, replace Gliding Residence Center 1 and 2. That was to house all of our first-year students on Monroe Park campus, to house all freshmen in quality traditional or semi-suite style units with common space for each RA community, and to allow housing options really between Monroe Park and the MCV campus with the market study and university mission. And so I highlight those 4 drivers because the project that we're going to talk a little bit more about, GRC, really accomplished a part of all 4 of those main drivers from the housing master plan, which to me is really important, right? If you're going to put the goals out there, what are you doing to obtain those goals in a housing master plan, ensuring that you're aligning funding, finances, thinking through how the project comes to light. And we were able to do, again, 2 of them completely accomplished, and then the other 2 we made a lot of progress on. And so I think when we think and talk about those primary drivers, this idea of putting all of our first years on Monroe Park campus was a really important driver, and one that I think we hold we think it helps in that community, it helps in that connection, helps in our staffing model, and support we provide there, and just think a lot about how this project helps set us up for success. You know, this slide here talks a little bit about unit typology, and I think it was important is that this was one of our biggest kind of pullouts from our master plan, is that we were very mindful that, you know, traditional first-year students are in this semi-suite or traditional type environment, and then as you progress up, then that's how kind of this idea of community oriented to student independence. What I will share is that we're all having conversations future, right? COVID has I think questioned us for what housing will look like, and so I think Dr. Yar highlighted some of that in his keynote yesterday about the future of housing. But I think this idea of what's this mean for building in the future it is going to become a question for us. You know, we will talk about, is traditional the future or not? And so currently it is, and Megan's going to be able to highlight how we've made that a success and how we're very happy with that setup. But I think it just gives this idea of community oriented, the student independence, and how does that flow on the line for our campus community.
So I had the pleasure of working with Dr. Irwin when he was at UNC Greensboro. And after he got to VCU, he called me one day and said, "Can you tell me what a housing master plan is? Because I got a situation here. There's something wrong, but I can't put my finger on it." So as some of you may have heard in the past, we use our software that we design with also as a database to figure out how much space outside the unit should be in a residence hall. And then we dug deeper into the unit typologies. And it makes sense that when you have a traditional double, you're intentionally pushing people, residents, out of their room to build community and common spaces. So you're going to need more of that in a traditional residence hall. By the time you get to the apartment, people have already been academically and socially successful. They've already brought some of that blue space into their unit. And so you don't need nearly as much. So we used that as a basis to analyze each of the existing halls. And you can see here on the left in blue, those industry standards. And then you can see in yellow how there was a lot of common space where it was needed the least, and not nearly enough where it was needed the most. And so that became a great tool to figure out how many beds we would lose in existing halls to right size the common space.
And then quickly, you can kind of see some of the before, like I always like this random photo of the elevator, but that's kind of where RAs in the first year community were doing some, you know, floor meetings and things of that nature. And so when you talk about like right sizing that common space, I think that highlights a lot of you kind of what the befores look like. The next slide, again, you know, we highlight in on the snake version and look to go, you know, we really wanted to talk about how do we make this, you know, the most efficient project build with the space and land that we have, because it was not very efficient with related to how you had to get through the building. The next slide shows that a little bit more as more of a wandering to get where you were trying to go. And so again, not only when we were going to spend the money and work on a project, and it was a public-private partnership, which I think is also important to me to highlight for Megan, because we're invested in those relationships for this project to work, but we also wanted to make it feel and look like a VCU community if you're a first-year student. And so I think that I'm going to now turn it over to Coop and let him talk a little bit more before Megan unveils kind of what the final end result was.
Thanks, Gavin. So as we sort of went into the process of designing this, you know, we thought about the building blocks, which, you know, the residential units, this being a first year community, and with the, you know, the charge from the housing master plan that, you know, we all wanted them housed in traditionals and semi-suites, both double occupancy. You know, we thought a lot about the 21st century project, and how that could help guide our thinking, you know, the desire both for community, but also for privacy. So as we started to look at these unit modules, you know, we designed them around a common width. What that would do is it would align the entrance doors across from each other so that, you know, students could open them up, promotes community. You know, we provided a little dividing wall between the beds so that there's a little bit of privacy. The desk is kind of in a common area, so people can come together and study if they want to. And then the semi-suites, obviously they have their bathroom in the room, and then the doubles use a community bath, which Megan will talk about in a little bit. As Gavin mentioned, you know, efficiency was very important because it's an urban site. We really wanted to make, as we like to say, the highest and best use of the land. So I put this diagram up just to highlight you know, how a lot of the more legacy high-rise student housing projects are configured, where if you imagine each one of these blue boxes is, let's say, a community of 34 students to an RA, and how conventionally, you know, you go up in the elevator, like in that photo that Gavin showed earlier, you step off and that little yellow space in the plan, that's the RA space. And so we really wanted to get away from this old idea of, well, all the common spaces on the ground floor and then upstairs is just student rooms. We wanted to get away from that idea towards more of what we came to call the neighborhood concept. And the idea being that even though it is a 12-story building, it can function in a way almost like a bunch of smaller communities kind of stacked up on top of each other. So we really wanted to bring that common space up to the upper floors. And you can see these two in this diagram, these 2-story common spaces grouping pairs of floors. And here's a diagram of how that starts to come together with the neighborhood lounge. So really bringing all those common functions together in one space: laundry, space to prep a meal, study space, and then some lounge, and really bringing it all together in one space to promote mixing and you know, people coming together. Obviously pre-COVID and then post-COVID, but those are really the goals that drove this. And here you can see how that begins to come together. On the top left, there's a laundry room that looks down into this double height central floor lounge volume, and you can see it's got these just fabulous views out onto Monroe Park. It's you know, everyone has great views that they can take advantage of. And then there's the space just down below that with the common lounge. There's some study spaces, and then the shared kitchen. And then here you can see, if you basically imagine turning around 180 degrees, there's some more private study spaces out on the exterior, with some more collaborative living learning zones kind of bridging in the middle with a connecting stair tying those two levels together. And I'll turn it over to Megan now, who will talk a little bit more about how it all came together.
Awesome. Thank you, Coop. So as Gavin mentioned earlier, this is a public-private partnership, and it is with American Campus Communities, ACC. They've been a tremendous partner working with us, and the building unveiled in 2018. So similarly, we're kind of in that third year of working with this community, and it's definitely different this year with COVID. But as I kind of go through these slides, I'm going to kind of give you kind of pre-COVID and then kind of how we've adjusted things with COVID as well this year in regards to our policies and just the setup within the residence halls for student success. But we always like to highlight this picture of GRC. This is the photographer standing kind of in Monroe Park, like Cooper mentioned earlier, looking into the building. And we've kind of named this picture the city that never sleeps. This community in its first 2 years pre-COVID, the lights are always on and it is always very active. And students really, really enjoy living in this community. Coop, if you want to go to the next slide. So once again, pictures pre-COVID. This is one of our main community lounges, right off of the main entrance to the community. And so lots of like very luscious, like furniture, very neat kind of artwork. It was really important both to ACC as well as to VCU to incorporate kind of local Richmond flair. And so we also have a very large art program here at VCU. And so we kind of dove into the local Richmond community as well as our VCU alums to have artwork displayed throughout the community. And you kind of see that through the bright, colorful pictures that you're going to see over the next few slides. But one of the things we always like to highlight is our fun little ram there on the mantle above the TV. So if you can go to the next slide. So this is also on the first floor of the GRC building. This is actually on the first floor, what was originally called the bathhouse. And that was featured in one of the slides that Gavin showed earlier. And it used to be the main entrance to the building. Students used to enter through this area, which you can see is now kind of turned into windows versus door entryways. But this was a big component for us to consider when building the or rebuilding the building because the community were very active in regards to making sure that this landmark building was infused into the overall design. And so working with the community was really important to us, making sure we had their buy-in because we were also, like Cooper talked about, making the building taller than originally was. And so there's a lot of negotiation that went into this, but it ended up being a terrific addition to the overall building design because it's provided another kind of quiet lounge space here on that first floor. And then the second floor of this bathhouse is actually like a student media room. So they can do video games, movie nights, etc. So this is definitely a space. We call it the Flex Lounge now. So you can see kind of we've put in, once again, it's kind of some soft case goods that are very easily movable and the students can move it around. This is where they host their like community council meetings on a weekly basis. And students just really enjoy kind of hanging out in this space. Next slide. Awesome. So another big aspect of this project that was really important to us and kind of our big idea, because it was kind of the first year building that both Gavin, myself, and Dr. Irwin had kind of worked on since arriving at VCU. And so we had done a couple apartment style buildings, but this was like our first year community. And so it's really important to us to live up to our university values around diversity and inclusion. So we went forward with infusing gender inclusive bathrooms into the facility. And so, thank you. So you can see in these pictures that we have floor to ceiling individual use stalls. And so on the bottom right, you can see kind of that's an individual shower stall. Across the way is kind of the individual toilet stalls, but then the sink area is kind of that community-based area. And so we've had really great response from our students. They really enjoy this, and we have not had a ton of complaints at all. The only complaints that we get from students are different levels and standards of cleanliness in regards to the use of these restrooms. But in our first year, it was really important that we did a lot of marketing and communication during summer orientation to our parents because this was a new type of bathroom facility that we were offering within our community since it was going to be a shared gender inclusive facility. And over time, after that kind of first year, it has not necessarily been an issue or concern because we've been able to make sure that we educate and they've been able to see like students utilize the space and whatnot. So I think really that first year, it was just the unknown and not knowing. But I think, you know, over the last few years, like students have really talked about really enjoying that space. And so these are the bathrooms, like Cooper mentioned, for the students that are living in the traditional type style rooms. But we also find that our students in our suite style rooms, even though they have their own bathrooms, end up utilizing these as well. So
yep, I wanted to highlight on that slide. I think this is a good example where I talked about our you know, traditionals or not, but I would say because of the design of this bathroom, we were actually able to keep all doubles occupied. So like we did not change our inventory for this like we did for some of our other traditional, because the bathroom having single space, you're able to bring in your own and lock off and the ventilation system there. So I think that's worth highlighting related to if we have traditionals, I can assure you that we would have this type of bathroom shower stall set up moving forward if we continue to go down that route for shower curtain options and things of that nature. And so I just wanted to highlight that as well.
In addition, before we move off this slide, I think it's important to highlight in regards to COVID as well, is that we worked with ACC, our partners, to increase our cleaning staff. So we have additional bathroom attendants that come in and clean these spaces on a more regular basis, since we were able to keep our occupancy at within that double occupancy in our traditional rooms and whatnot in the community, as well as in the sink area. They went ahead and installed plexiglass between each kind of sink station that gets cleaned kind of in between individual use as well. And so that was another great partnership with ACC in regards to keeping our students safe during COVID as well. Next slide. This is just a fun picture we like to highlight. So you can see kind of the bathhouse that I was referring to earlier is that kind of smaller stone structure. And then to the right is kind of our new main entryway into the community. Next slide, Coop. So this is our big and beautiful lobby of Gladding Residence Center. And when it was originally designed, we had grand plans for how this space was going to be used. And in all actuality, it did not work out in our in our best interest. Being an urban community, safety and security is our top priority. And so I took this picture and sent it over to Cooper one day and was like, look what I did to your lobby. And so we had to install stanchions and increase our security staff, because there is about well, when we're at full occupancy, including the building behind GRC, which is called GRC 3, we're at about 1,700 students that occupy this building. And so thinking about 1,700 students that are using this one single entrance in and out all day long, it is a very busy space. And in order for our information desk staff to monitor access control, it was important that we were able to kind of create this more traffic controlled system so that we could ensure the safety and security of the community, so that we didn't just have non-community members or non-residence hall students entering into the community. And so this is definitely something lesson learned for us at VCU in regards to thinking about how we utilize our lobby spaces, how we set it up for safety and security moving forward, and something that we're considering for future projects as well. One of the other benefits of building this building, the P3, was that we were able to purchase some of the space within the community. So we were able to add this space and purchase it. So this is our residential leadership center. So this is on kind of one side of the building. It has a separate entrance off of a different street. But this is where like our Residence Hall Association, our National Residence Hall Honorary groups meet. This is also where our RAs come to do a lot of their programming and bulletin boards, door decks. It's a great space for our students to utilize. And they really, really enjoy it. You can also see there's a glass conference room in the back there that we utilize as a department for department meetings. We always struggled to find locations on campus prior to having GRC for us to meet as a very large department. So this was a great collaboration to build this space for both our staff and our students moving forward. So in addition to the Residential Leadership Center, we were also able to relocate and build a new main housing office, which was really exciting for us as well. So in the front right corner of GRC, we built our main housing office. And so we were able to move more centrally to campus. Prior to GRC, we were located kind of on the outskirts in one of our apartment buildings. And so this move has really transformed kind of the interactions that we have with students, because we're closer by to where the daily traffic of students is around the classrooms and food locations, et cetera, and around Monroe Park. And so students definitely pre-COVID would come in and spend a lot more time in the main housing office, which was really exciting for us as housing professionals. So it was a great addition and a great opportunity for us to take advantage of when building this P3 was to relocate our housing office. So those are all of the GRC slides that we wanted to be able to talk to you a little bit about. And so kind of as we're wrapping up, just kind of wanted to see from my colleagues if there was anything in the chat that people had put around any big ideas that have come up that they wanted to discuss. If not, we would turn it over to questions.
I wanted to add, there was a great question in the chat about LLCs and emotional assistance animals, and how do we work with both of those things in new areas where we've had new facilities, both for Douthit and our core campus project that we opened in 2016. We put sort of a temporary ban on new LLCs in new buildings because we didn't want to inadvertently create scenarios where a living learning community was only available at one of our most expensive price points. So we really have only done those, for example, for our Douthit Hills project, there's one LLC, it's for 30 students, and it's connected to the academic building next door. So that made a good sense for that synergy. But other academic partners that have wanted to come into the new buildings, we've said no. And we probably will continue to do so unless there are compelling sort of strategic reasons to do so. Just one thought process.
Yeah, I would highlight off of that from a VCU lens, we We did put some there, partly because the common space was so advantageous to do so for some of those communities. Engineer floor that had some specific interest, and that one floor that's kind of by itself, and being able to integrate that group. But we also were very strategic about price points for our new facility. So I share that from the traditional, and this new facility was the same cost as the traditional in our older facilities. And that was a strategic kind of just financial planning for us, of we wanted to make sure that we maintain access from a financial lens. I think where we get the questions is usually from those that are in other buildings paying the same cost as a new build. However, it did allow that, that financials, especially for those traditionals, that the suite building is its kind of own price point because of how it's the only kind of suite like that. But the traditionals, we were very mindful of keeping those at the same price range as well for accessibility. And I think part of this was if you wanted to share anything about your own big idea, or if you had questions for us as a group, we're happy to take them. We know we have about 4 or 5 minutes left, and wanted to be mindful to leave a little bit of time at the end, because sometimes we know you saw something and you go, I have this question, I'd like to ask it. So happy to take questions or hear your big idea as well.
So, hello, my name is Gabriela Cabrera. I'm here at Virginia Tech. Thank you for your presentation. So Gavin, you mentioned that VCU used to be a commuter university. Do you see now that with all these renovations, students tend to want to live more on campus because of those things, or are students really commuting as well? Because I've seen VCU and it's really cool. It's in the city. It's really integrated and things like that. So.
Yeah, it's one of those, like, we've always had housing, but I think what we've seen is more of an interest in staying on campus. So we usually house around 85% of the first year class, and that's without a live-on requirement or anything of that nature. So I think that we've definitely seen just the interest in staying on campus and what that brings with connections. And so again, I think the beauty of past years is, when we've been able to kind of learn from some of those things. I think the common space that Eric highlighted for first years, like, we will always build out appropriate common space moving forward, especially for first year communities, whereas some of our apartments were originally larger LLPs, so they had an abundance of community space. But we definitely are seeing the vibrancy of campus and what that looks like. And I've talked to other SHOs that have been in kind of urban city areas, and this whole idea of, like, how do you balance and ensure that the whole university understands what it means to be more residential, and that food services are available, and that things are going on campus. And I think VCU, in my 7 years here, have made a lot of positive impact in that direction, and students are excited. They're staying around, they're hanging out, and so they've always been on campus, but yeah, we've definitely seen growth over the years.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think the other thing I would quickly share too is that our demand study has, the 2 demand studies that we did in 2014, 2018 also were really informative for us in regards to the needs for housing and the type of housing that we needed to provide. So we were also in the midst of doing a master plan for the university, as well as our student commons with Air St. Gross. And so also learned some information in regards to potential for, down the road, maybe needing more professional graduate housing. And so those are things that we're exploring for the future as well. So I'll highly recommend demand studies as a way to get that information too.
Thank you. I also think the inclusive bathrooms are very impressive because on many campuses that can be something that not everyone agrees with. So I'm glad that you all had a plan prior to that and kind of ease people in them, because even though we're in 2021, it doesn't always feel that way. So that's really cool. Thank you.
Yeah, I think Megan highlighted, I think the education to parents and families was really, really key for us. Because what we found is that sometimes it wasn't the student that really had questions. They were like, we understand the sink area is common space, but it was the family members that would say, I don't know about, what about X? And so I think we've got less questions year 2 than we did year 1, and even less questions year 3 as we did year 1 and 2. And so we put it out there on our virtual tours as well, and know that it's an option and kind of what that looks like. So thanks for that, Gabrielle.
Yeah, one of the things that I would highlight is that with the bathrooms, because we have both the suite style and traditional style, we had to be very intentional with our orientation because that's where students stay is in GRC over the summer. And so that first year after the building was built, they put everyone in the suites. And so when students arrived, everyone thought they were going to have their own bathroom. And so the next year we had to make sure that we had put people both in traditional and suite style so that they knew what they were kind of getting into, that they had either option. And we also increased our marketing around making sure that students truly understood when they got their housing assignment, are they in a suite or a traditional? Because that was something we had to work through with a lot of parents and students after that first year.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you, Gavin.
I know we're running out of time, and I think the evaluation link was dropped. Again, happy to stay on. I know we, for those, Caitlin, anything else you would share from moderator standpoint, but I know some of you are having to dip out to other meetings and exhibit time as well, but happy to take other questions as well.
Let's give our presenters